Absolutely, Nancy. And so many of those top U.S. CEOs, including Larry Fink and Steve Schwarzman, essentially telling CNBC that they had suggested again and again to the organizers, to the government here in Saudi Arabia, and to Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, the man behind the Vision 2030, that it wasn't just the right time to be going ahead with this conference. The Saudis, of course, made the call to go ahead with it anyway, despite a massive amount of dropouts from the West, particularly from the United States as well. So many of their investors deciding not to attend the conference this year. It's going to kick off, as you say, in just a couple of hours from now. And all of this against the backdrop of this investigation into what just happened to Jamal Khashoggi, his death and disappearance. So many things coming out in the last 24 hours alone. And of course, President Erdogan of Turkey expected to release what he is just deeming a bombshell on this story later today. Now listen in to what President Trump had to say yesterday.
I don't want to lose all of that investment that's being made in our country. I don't want to lose 1 million jobs. I don't want to lose $110 billion in terms of investment, but it's really $450 billion if you include other than military. So that's very important, but we're going to get to the bottom of it, yeah.
Of course, President Trump there essentially saying he doesn't want to lose all of that investment, all of those billions of dollars. But of course, it's much more than just an economic and financial relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Of course, you have to remember that this has many, many repercussions in terms of the diplomatic space, in terms of regional security. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, even though he decided not to attend this FII Davos in the Desert conference, they decided the optics weren't right, that the time wasn't right. He is here in Saudi Arabia, and he's been talking about terror financing. You have to remember, Nancy, that in the area of terror financing, there's a joint U.S., Saudi, and GCC center here in the country to look at terror financing and to really try to keep a handle on what's been happening, not just with regards to the funding of terror in groups like ISIS, but also in terms of other groups in the region. So there's so many different legs to this story and so many reasons that the United States still needs Saudi Arabia.
Yes, Hadley, I think that is an excellent point. And it's not just the U.S., it's not just leaders in Washington that have to contend with this. We heard a similar message coming from the U.K. Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt yesterday. He, too, talked about the fact that the partnership with Saudi Arabia involving defense and security operations had saved lives on the streets of Britain. But he also did express some concern about what we know so far as what actually did happen with Jamal Khashoggi. And I think that's why this statement coming from Turkey will be so critical as many await more information on that front. And I just want to play a little bit of what Jeremy Hunt actually had to say in Parliament in the UK yesterday. Take a listen.
The claim that Mr. Khashoggi died in a fight does not amount to a credible explanation. There remains an urgent need to establish exactly what happened on the 2nd of October and thereafter. All these actions are far more effective when they are taken in concert with our European and American.
So there you have it, Jeremy Hunt talking about the fact that they would like to work in concert with friends in Europe and America on this response. And Hadley, as you watch the corporate response that we've seen so far, looking ahead to this FII conference kicking off today, I think, too, many business leaders would like to get more guidance from the politicians on the conclusions here, how they intend to move forward, because it's such a difficult situation for those in the C-suite. I mean, even those companies that have elected to attend the FII, they, too, are worried about potential backlash. And I think one response that we saw coming from the Total CEO is very interesting in this regard. I just want to bring it up for our viewers because we have this statement that Patrick Poyan posted on LinkedIn. He's talking about the fact he doesn't think boycotts or withdrawing investment helps. In fact, he says it only hurts the ordinary people of the country. He then goes on to say, I'm convinced that an empty chairs at the table strategy serves no useful purpose, especially when it comes to respect for human rights. So, Hadley, a very interesting line there coming from the Total CEO. He is saying in so many words, we don't like at all what we've seen with regard to Jamal Khashoggi's death, but we have to have a seat at the table. And it also makes me think, if you're the leader of an oil company that has been doing business in Saudi Arabia for years, is your whole outlook on this a little bit different than, let's say, a consumer-facing company that has a different regard when it comes to any pressure they might face for consumers? Because for a lot of these oil companies, they're saying, look at the places in which we do business.
What's a convenient opinion to have, isn't it, Nancy, if you're sitting in that chair at Total or any of the other big oil majors, but certainly business as usual. I mean, in spite of the fact of what's going on in the geopolitical space, you have to remember that these companies operate in very difficult circumstances all over the world, particularly in this region, particularly in Iraq, for example, over all the last few years in particular. They were operating in Libya under Gaddafi. I mean, these are companies that are used to working in difficult areas, and they understand that it's business as usual, even if it's not politics as usual. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see who's on the sidelines of this conference. And a lot of Russians, a lot of Chinese, understanding the value of economic diplomacy, particularly when it comes to soft power. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that all shakes out. And of course, this is just a few hours away from these revelations from President Erdogan of Turkey. So a lot to watch out for, Nancy. Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.